يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون.
الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أسأل الله العظيم الجليل أن يجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما ولا يجعل من بيننا شقيا ولا محروما. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for attending Majalis al-Dhikr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends malaika, He sends angels. And their main objective, these angels, is to seek out these majalis. And they come, and by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His command, they lower their wings. And they bring with them the sakina, the tranquility of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they will sit around us until we complete the majlis. And after which they will report back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they will name you by name, fil mala'i al-ala. Subhanallah, ya laha min ni'mah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mention us in the highest mention. May He make us sincere for His cause. Tonight, inshallah, we're going to continue the seerah of one of the ulama, the great Salaf, one of the greatest ulama to ever live. And his seerah, there is many narrations that go about his life and his accomplishments. And subhanallah, it is a seerah aqira. It is full of lessons, of ibar. And this is why I wanted to mention this great scholar. وهو من هو سعيد بن جبير. Sa3eed ibn Jubayr was a tabi'i. He was not a sahabi, he was a tabi'i. في العصر التابعي. And he was أعلم التابعين, the most knowledgeable of all the tabi'in. وصاحب عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله عنه وارضاه. It was said that he was the shadow of Abdullah ibn Abbas. Wherever Abdullah ibn Abbas was, Sa3eed ibn Jubayr was there. And he was very, very devoted to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowledge. Alhamdulillah. And his jahd, his effort was not to go in vain. So many of the ummah benefited from his ilm. Until this day we benefit from his ilm. وروى, and he transmitted many of the ahadith upon the narration of Aisha radiallahu anha, and Abi Musa al-Ash'ari, and Abi Hurairah radiallahu anha, and Anas ibn Malik. Many of the Sahaba that he witnessed, he is in the chain of narration of the ahadith. One of the famous ahadith that was narrated by Sa3eed ibn Jubayr, we mentioned it last week. Who was here last week? So I want to see if, test your memory. What was the famous hadith that he narrated? I'll give you a hint. 70,000.
Oh, it was the hadith where one man stood up. No, the Prophet said, 70,000 people will enter Jannah without hisab. The ones that don't look for raqis, they do ruqya themselves, they read the Quran. And then one man stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, am I one of them? He said, yeah, you're one of them. The next man said, Ya Rasulullah, am I one of them? He said, he beat you to it.
The hadith that Sa3eed ibn Jubayr narrated is the fact that there are 70,000 of the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that will enter Jannah without hisab or iqab, without any account, any punishment. There is no judgment for them. They are in Jannah VIP, no lineups, nothing. And they have specific attributes. هُمُ الَّذِينَ لَا يَسْتَرْقُونَ. They don't seek ruqya. Okay, they don't ask people for ruqya. They do ruqya upon themselves. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لَا يَطَّيَّرُونَ. They don't believe in folklore. In the Arabs used to say tatayyur is if they saw a crow in the morning of their venture, they would turn back. They would say it's a bad omen, or an owl. But if they saw a white dove, they would say let's go. This is tatayyur. They don't believe in folklore or this gibberish. وهم الذين لا يطيرون ولا يسترقون ولا يكتوون. And they do not do kawi. What does kawi? Do you guys know what kawi is?
ironing like the wounds?
Yes. And it's still practiced today in parts of Africa.
What was that, sorry?
So they take, they heat up rods of iron under the fire, and then wherever the ailment is, let's say somebody has a pain in their stomach and they tried so many medicines and didn't work, they would burn that place. It's called kawi. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam naha anil kawi. It's not haram, but naha an. The ulama said, as a last ditch effort, this could be practiced. But these 70,000, they don't do it. And then to cap it off, وَعَلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَتَوَكَّلُونَ, and they are fully reliant upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Sa3eed ibn Jubayr is in this chain of narration, and he never sought ruqyah from anyone because of this, subhanAllah. And we mentioned that his devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala led him to recite and memorize the Quran, and not only memorize it, his tafsir was impeccable. نقل عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنه وأرضاه التفسير كلمة بكلمة حرف بحرف. And it was reported that he would complete the Quran recitation within 2 days. Within 2 days, subhanAllah. وَكَانَ مِنْ أَخْشَعْ عِبَادَ اللَّهِ subhanahu wa ta'ala. He would stand fixed in salah. And we mentioned that this is an attribute that is lost. Many of us, when we're in salah, we're constantly thinking of something else. We need to block out the world when we're in salah. We need to completely stop and take that break. And this is what makes us believers, because we have devoted this time to Al-Malik al-Dayyan. We're standing before the King of all kings. But yet, you see us moving, scratching it, like every itch, and you're reaching into your pockets. This is not khushu'. This is not khushu'. And Sa3eed ibn Jubayr was very, very focused in his salah, and it was noted. Now, we left off when we mentioned the fitna. Every alim, every scholar, every prophet, every pious person undergoes trials and tribulations. And Sa3eed ibn Jubayr was not free from this. During his time, there was a man by the name of Abdurrahman ibn al-Ash'ath, who was the general of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, Hajjaj ibn Yusuf's army. He was under the wing of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, who was under the wing of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who was the Khalifa at the time. And this man, Ibn al-Ash'ath, he had a resounding impact on the Futuhat. He was, mashallah, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expanding the Muslim empire. And he reached the lands of the Turks. And they had a king named Ritbil. They owned vast lands. And Ibn al-Ash'ath took a lot of these lands. وَغَنَمْ غَنَائِمْ هَائِلَةً. And he took a lot of their wealth by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala under the command of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. The army that was under the command of Ibn al-Ash'ath was over 150,000 strong. A massive army, well equipped, well trained. So after the Futuhat, they didn't complete the entire conquest. Ibn al-Ash'ath sought to take a break. He said, you know what, we're going to take a year's break to recoup, to regenerate, let the soldiers recover, and bi'idhnillah will continue. Al-Hajjaj, he didn't like this. Al-Hajjaj is in Iraq. So he wrote to Ibn al-Ash'ath and he said to him, why is it that you have stopped? Did I command you to stop? Are you a coward? Are you afraid to keep going? Keep going. And this bothered Abdurrahman. And a lot of his supporters, 150,000 strong, they said, you know what? Al-Hajjaj, and I don't know if you've read some of the Tariq, Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi was a zalim, hands down. No one can say, debate this. He was a man that ruled with an iron fist and persecuted Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive him. He was a Muslim, but he ruled with an iron fist, and many a times that iron fist came down and he shed the blood of many Muslims. So they said, Ya Ibn al-Ash'ath, we are your army, 150,000 strong. Why do you take this from Al-Hajjaj? He's this and that, and he's wronged so many people, and you can see his arrogance. Why don't we turn against him? And هذه الفكرة عجبت Ibn al-Ash'ath. Ibn al-Ash'ath said, you know what? this is the time. Let's take him out. And Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf was under the wing, the Khilafah of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Their main objective wasn't to overtake the Khilafah, it was to take out Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. So this was called Fitnatul Qurra. It's mentioned in the Tariq. Many of the great scholars have mentioned this in detail. And this is a fitna wa zalla. It is not something that we can look to and say, this is the dalil for us to go against our Muslim leaders. Bil'aks, absolutely the opposite. Because if you look, and inshallah we're going to go into what happened, you'll realize the dangers and what has occurred after, when they went out against Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. The strange thing that we have to mention is that even though there were Sahaba alive at this time, not a single Sahabi joined in the exodus or in the rivaling of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. Not a single Sahabi. However, many of the Tabi'een, وَأَعْلَمُهُمْ, and the most knowledgeable of them, went out. Abdurrahman ibn Ash'ath, he was their leader. Muhammad ibn Sa3eed ibn Abi Waqqas, Abdurrahman ibn Abi Layla, Kumayl ibn Ziyad, Malik ibn Dinar, a lot of these great notable ulama, they said, you know what, we'll support Ibn al-Ash'ath, because they despised Al-Hajjaj. And many of the ulama, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them, they even passed takfir on Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. They deemed him to be a kafir. However, this is their ijtihad, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive them. Before they went out, they wanted to go to the most notable of the scholars, Hasan al-Basri, rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatan wasi'ah. And they said to him, Ya Shaykh, if we have your support, we have the full support of Basra. We have the full support of the populace. Please give us your support. فَصَفًا, and he used his hikmah by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said to them, he said, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has tried the Muslims with the batsh, the arrogance, and the iron fist of Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, then this is from our own doings. فَلَيَتِنَا نَصْبِرْ, we must be patient and we must seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if he is a fitna, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with him. Do not go out, I reject. So what did they say? They said, you don't know what you're talking about. And later on in history, it is noted that no one that went out didn't regret. Everyone that went out regretted. And Al-Hasan al-Basri, he tried to sway them the other way. However, they were bent on taking out Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. So when they reached the halfway mark to Iraq with their massive army, 150,000 strong, the word spread like wildfire. And many of the supporters, they grew in zeal and energy. تحمسوا. And they said, you know what? After we take out Al-Hajjaj, we're going to go after Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. Because who is he, a Khalifa, to place upon us such a burden, a man that rules with an iron fist such as this? So we're going to go after Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, وَنَقْلِبِ الْخِلَافَةِ وَنُبَايَعْ Abdurrahman ibn Ash'ath. And when this was announced, this was the end. Because Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, he sent a letter to Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. He said, this is what they're aiming for now. So Abdul Malik ibn Marwan sent him his army. So it was 2 armies versus 1. And the battle, some of the ulama, they said it took 100 days. Some even said to 2 years. It was a 2-year-long battle. And the 2 armies, they faced off. And there was 90 combats. And the last and final blow was delivered by Al-Hajjaj. And he defeated Ibn al-Ash'ath's army. And within that ma'rakah, over 100,000 were killed of Muslims. Yani, if you look at the khasara, the great loss that the Islam has suffered and that continues to suffer, this is all from ignorance. Because Abdurrahman ibn al-Ash'ath, he had an army للفتوحات لكي يقاتل الكفار. He was fighting the disbelievers and spreading Islam. He used that same army to fight who? The Muslims. And this was a khasara. And from those who fled, a lot of people ran away. After the war was finished, Abdurrahman bin Ash'ath escaped. And when he escaped, Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf, he told his junud, he says, no one gets away. I want everyone captured and killed. Everyone. So they would chase them to and fro, regardless. Abdurrahman bin Ash'ath, it was noted that he reached the lands of the Turks to the same king that he was fighting, Ritbil. And he sought refuge in his lands, a kafir. And Ritbil offered him refuge, and a few of the men that were with him. When they reached these lands, they were offered refuge. And the news, the khabar came to Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf. So he sent a letter to Ritbil. He said, listen, if you don't give me Abdurrahman ibn Ash'ath and whoever is with him under your refuge, I will send you an army so vast that it will wipe you out entirely. And he knew at this point the Turks were very weak. So they said, you know what? Send them back. So they tied the men back. They tied the men up. They bound them 2 by 2, 2 by 2. And they marched them towards Baghdad. Along the way, and this is cited في الصحيح, Abdurrahman bin Ash'ath, they reached a high point in the hills. And he's tied to another companion, a Muslim. And he knew that by the time he's going to get to Hajjaj bin Yusuf, he's as good as dead. So what did he decide to do? He threw himself off the cliff. Committed suicide. And killing with him his Muslim brother who was bound to him. So anyone who wants to take this as a hujjah and say, well, you know, the ulama, they went out and they went against the zalim, the leader who was persecuting them. No, this is not a hujjah. This is a zallah. This is a point where we need to learn from the Salaf. And mind you, the Salaf Salih, our pious predecessors, they were not ma'sumun. They were not infallible. مات المعصوم المصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم. The only infallible was Rasulullah al-Qasim صلى الله عليه وسلم. So over 100,000 died in this ma'arakah, and many of the survivors, they fled. Amongst those who fled was Sa3eed ibn Jubayr. Sa3eed ibn Jubayr, he wrote in his diary, he said, 12 years I was on the run. 12 years he did not stay still until khalas, he couldn't bear. You remember, this is a man who used to make Umrah and Hajj every year. So he said, istahayt. He said, I could no longer run. I had to go to the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he went to Mecca al-Mukarramah. And he thought that in Mecca, he is amin, he is safe. كل من دخلها آمن. And within Mecca, the wali of Mecca at the time was under Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf, and his name was Khalid ibn Abdullah al-Qasri. And he was very devout to Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf. So the people warned Sa3eed bin Jubayr. They said, listen, if this guy sees you, he's going to take you. And Sa3eed bin Jubayr, he said, I can't leave. I want to stay in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And surely he was captured. When he was captured, he was sent to Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf in Iraq. And along the way, he's talking to his companions, and it was cited. Everyone was distraught because he is the most knowledgeable of the tabi'een, and they know for certain he's going to die, but he's not saddened. And they asked him, they says, Ya Shaykh, are you not saddened? What's going to happen to you? How can we stop this? And he said, no, don't worry. For I know for a fact, bi'idhnillah, my dua will be accepted. And they said, what dua is this? He said, me and 2 of my companions, we made a dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qad istajaba lahuma. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepted my 2 companions' dua. And I am the 3rd, bi'idhnillah, may Allah accept my dua. And their dua was to die upon Tawheed al-Shuhada. And when he was in prison in Iraq, a lot of his companions would talk to him and they will say, Ya Shaykh, how come you're not sad? And he quoted the ayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ما أصاب من مصيبة ما أصاب من مصيبة ما أصاب من مصيبة ما كسبت أيديكم. He knew that this is a musibah, this is a fitna, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has predestined this. And Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, when he used to bring out those who went against him, he would give them one chance. يا إما يقر بالكفر أو يقتل. It's either they declare that they have disbelieved or they are slaughtered. Because الخروج على الحاكم كفر. So he said, if they're going against me and they're trying to kill me, then they are kuffar. So a young man and an old man were both brought before Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. And he asked the young man, he says, Atakfur? Do you disbelieve? Did you disbelieve by coming out to fight me? And he was amongst the army of Ibn al-Ash'ath. So he said, Na'am. Absolutely. It is an act of kufr. And the old man is standing there and he asks and he says, I don't think the old man is going to agree with you. So the old man looks at Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, he says, Bala ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. If there's anything greater than kufr, I will testify that I did it. Just to get set free. Because this is a moment, it's do or die. And this is a moment where you're allowed. You are actually allowed to proclaim kalimat al-kufr. So the young man was set free and the old man was set free. And another man was brought and he said to him, upon which deen are you? The first question. He says, ala millati Ibrahim. So he says, Qtuluh, kill him. He didn't confess that he is a kafir. And then another man was brought out and he said, upon what deen are you? And he said, upon your father's deen, Sheikh Yusuf. So he said, set him free. So as the man is walking out, he turned around and he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. The man before me was on the same deen, the deen of Ibrahim, alayhi salatu wassalam. Hanifan wa ma kana min al-mushrikeen. How come you let me free? He said, because you mentioned my father's name. So the man said to him, he said, if your father did nothing wrong except for give birth to you, then that is a sufficient sin for him. He says, bring him back and kill him. So they killed him. It was a slaughter. There is no mercy. Batsh Jabarut. This guy had no mercy. And then Ash-Sha'bi, one of the greatest scholars, he came out and he said, Amu'minun ant am kafir? Are you a believer or a disbeliever? And the response that Ash-Sha'bi gave was amazing. He says, Ahsan Allahu li Amir al-Mu'mineen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, بعدك اكتحلنا, and he says, اكتحلنا fitna. He says, we underwent a great severe trial. And this trial did not leave us atqiya abriya. We were not empowered by this fitna. We did not become more pious, and we were not successful over you. He لم يقر بالكفر. He never confessed that what he did was an act of kufr, but he confessed what they did was wrong. So قال يا شعبي, he said to him, you know what? You are free. Because at least you have confessed that what you did was wrong. So he was set free. And then it was time for Sa3eed ibn Jubayr. Sa3eed ibn Jubayr walked in with his head down. And Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf is a man of hiba. He has an awe, an aura, very powerful. And he said to him, أَأَنْتَ Sa3eed ibn Jubayr? And he knows who he is. Everybody knows who Sa3eed ibn Jubayr is. Very notable alim, jaleel. And he said, نعم. He said, yes, I am Sa3eed ibn Jubayr. فقال له الحجاج بلى أنت الشقي ibn Qusayr. You are not Sa3eed ibn Jubayr. Sa3eed is the one who is successful, content. Jubayr is the one who, al-'azam, your bones when they're full and strong, Jabr, they're Jubayr. So he flipped his name. He says, Anta Shaqi, you are a loser. Ibnu Qusayr, the son of the broken. So Sa3eed ibn Jubayr, he responded, بكلمة الحق. He said, my mother is the one who named me, and I'm well aware of my name. And this is noted. Al-Hajjaj, he said something so despicable. He says, شَقِيتَ وَشَقِيَتْ أُمُّكَ. He says, you are lost and you are a loser, and so is your mother. يعني هذا كلام لا يقال. These are words you should never say to any Muslim, let alone a عالم جليل. فقال له شقيت وشقيت أمك. And then he said, Sa3eed ibn Jubayr says, إنما الشقاء لأهل النار. He says, the losers of the people who enter hellfire, those are the greatest losers. He didn't respond to him, no, you're a loser. No, he responded with كلمة الحق. He said to him, أكافر أم مؤمن أنت? Are you a believer or a non-believer? قال ما كفرت منذ آمنت. I have never disbelieved ever since I became a believer and I was born a believer. So he said to him, I will kill you. I will kill you. وسأبدلك من هذه الدنيا إلى نار تلظى. He says, I will kill you and I will transition you from this life to a hellfire. Sa3eed ibn Jubayr, he looked at him with full confidence and he said, if I knew that you are the Lord of this, then I would have no choice but to worship you. Because this is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to decide, not you. So he said, I will kill you. Sa3eed ibn Jubayr was ready. And he faced the Qibla. And he said, وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِي لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. I face the Qibla towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sense. So Al-Hajjaj bin Yusuf, this angered him. He says, turn him around. I don't want him facing the Qibla when he dies. And he said, أَيْنَمَا تُوَلَّوْا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Doesn't matter which way you face, for you are facing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said, put his face in the dirt to the ground and kill him. فَقَالَ مِنْهَا خَرَجْنَاكُمْ وَفِيهَا نُعِيدُكُمْ وَمِنْهَا نُخْرِجُكُمْ تَارَةً أُخْرَى. Every time he gets to respond, he responds with the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And his last dua, the last dua before he was killed, was Allahumma la tusallithu ala ahadin ba'di. Oh Allah, do not allow him to kill or oppress anyone after me. وَقُطِعَ رَأْسُهُ وَمَاتَ شَهِيدًا. And it was recorded that 15 days after, Hajjaj bin Yusuf's life would end. And during those 15 days, he was miserable. He would wake up at night yelling and screaming, Mali wali Sa3eed, Mali wali Sa3eed. He regretted the one death, which was the murder of Sa3eed ibn Jubayr. And Maymun ibn Mahram, he said, when Sa3eed ibn Jubayr was murdered, not a single Muslim on the earth could live without his ilm. And Al-Hasan al-Basri said, by Allah, if the entire world came and sharaku fi qatl Sa3eed, ahlakahum Allah kama qala. He says, if the entire world, min mashriqiha wa maghribiha, came and they killed Sa3eed ibn Jubayr, they would deserve the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was noted that Hajjaj ibn Yusuf died a horrible death, bleeding from everywhere. And his biggest regret was the fact that he killed Sa3eed ibn Jubayr. Mali wali Sa3eed, Mali wali Sa3eed. And if you read in the qisas, in the tarikh, there is many versions of the story. And there's a version that is very popular, that Al-Dhahabi qala qissatun munkara. From the details of the story are many details that are munkara, meaning they're lies, they're too far-fetched. And I'll mention some of them to you. When they were taking Sa3eed ibn Jubayr to Iraq, it was mentioned in one of the stories, in one of the historical depictions, that along the way they reached the cave, and there's a rahib a monk who lived in this cave. And he told them, he says, you can stay within the cave until you depart the next morning, but do not camp outside, for there's many lions. There used to be a lot of lions in the Arab lands. So everyone entered this cave. And Sa3eed ibn Jubayr Abba, he said, no, I don't want to enter the cave. I want to remain outside. They said to him, there's lions roaming the lands. You're going to get eaten. You're going to get mauled. He says, Bala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect me. And He will make the lions protect me. You probably heard the story. It's on YouTube everywhere. It's munkara, by the way. It is far-fetched and it is lies. So, when he was outside the cave, lahadu, they witnessed that the lions came and they were rubbing against him and they sat with him. And when the rahib saw this, he became a Muslim. And many details that are fabricated. The reason why I wanted to mention this is because if you look at the Salaf Salih, our great pious predecessors, they sifted through the details. And they took only that which is solid. So I could sit here and entertain you and add, lions and different animals, but this is not the moral. The moral of the story is that Sa3eed ibn Jubayr, he died upon the haqq. وَالْعِبْرَةُ فِي الْخَوَاتِيمِ. And the lesson is in the end. If you live upon the haqq, you die upon what? The haqq. وَهُوَ قَالَ كَلِمَةُ الْحَقِّ. All he said was the word of truth. For us today, we need to take a lesson from this. Are we living upon the truth? وَكُنْ صَرِيحٌ. And be honest with yourselves, and I'm going to be honest with myself. Because these past days, weeks, we are all in need to reflect. If you look around, and we have been making dua for how many years? اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم حرر فلسطين اللهم حرر الأقصى وهل من مجيب. Is there an answer? Is there an answer? And I'll tell you, and this is for me primarily, if you change what's within yourself that's wrong, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change what's wrong with our affairs. Have any of us left aside the habitual, constant sins that we commit on a daily basis? Everyone has one or two, 10, 15, I don't care. Did you leave aside one sin for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala لكي ينصرنا? Be honest with yourselves. Have you left aside that one sin that plagues you for the sake of Allah so that He can lift the burden, the slaughter of the Muslims? And we stand and we make dua, oh Allah, give us victory. But we are not willing to sacrifice. We're not willing to change. How is it that you expect to die upon the haqq if you don't live upon it? This is the ibrah. This is the lesson you need to take. Uqsim billah, by Allah, if we all get together and realize that we must change, we must improve in order for the ummah, the state of the ummah, to improve. This is a'zam silah. This is the greatest weapon to come pure, sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept us and accept our call and our cry and hear our dua when we have left Him? We have left Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our own desires. We cannot sacrifice for our nafs. Everything that you want, you do, regardless, haram. How do you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to answer your dua when you haven't left the muharramat? How is He supposed to give us victory? How are we supposed to die upon the truth? I know it's something tough to think about. It's a tough pill to swallow, especially for myself, because uqsim billah, we are all sinners. ما في واحد في المجلس هذا لم يذنب. But we are constantly in need of that reminder. المؤمن إذا ذكر ذكر. When reminded, the believer comes back. Raja. And many you see, subhanAllah, so many feeds on YouTube right now, everybody's talking about a solution to the Palestinian conflict. And I hate the word conflict. It's a Zionist apartheid and occupation. We all know that. The solution. Some say we need to have a two-state solution. Sah? You've heard of the two-state solution? Huh? This is absolute rubbish. It will never happen, by the way. And I'll tell you why. Because if Palestine was to establish a country, autonomous, with its own ability, economy, infrastructure, government, they have the right to establish an army. And you know the Zionists would not let that. So there goes that idea, the two-state solution. You've heard of the one-state solution. You heard this, right? Why not just be one country? Why not? Good idea. This will never happen as well, because the Zionist regime will never allow it. Why is that? Because they are outnumbered. They are outnumbered. And if they practice democracy, as they quote-unquote call it, which is a demagoguery, it's not democracy, they would lose. The Palestinians overwhelm them and outnumber them. So there's no two-state or one-state solution. There's only one solution. What is that? Ar-Raja. Return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because we know, and you can sit here on your hands and do nothing about it, and the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come true. Undoubtedly. The word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be established throughout the lands. And no, this is not a war against Palestinians. This is not a war against the factions that are fighting. This is a war against Islam. And the Zionists, their objective is to attack and destroy and eliminate Islam. Walakin, hayhat, hayhat. It will never happen. Islam will be established through every square inch, every foot of the land. Sha'a man sha'a wa aba man aba. And you can sit here, sit on your hands and do nothing about it, and it will happen. Or you can change yourself and improve your family, improve your neighbors, improve your community, improve your society. And by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will be a utilized mechanism to facilitate this great progress and this great success. Because there is no other choice. There is no other choice. The victory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is 100% guaranteed. وَأَيِّمُ Absolutely guaranteed, without a shadow of a doubt, that Islam will be victorious. الْمُسْتَقْبَلْ لِهَذَا الدِّينِ لَا مَحَالَ لَا شَكٍّ. But it's for you and me to establish that change within ourselves, to improve ourselves, for the state of the ummah to improve. And if you want to die a shaheed, then you beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. How many shuhada today? In the hundreds. Women, children, men, old, young. Every day they're dying. أحسبهم يعني على خير نسأل الله أن يجعلهم في الشهداء اللهم آمين. And here we are, muna'amun. We're just living lavished. We eat whatever we want, whenever we want. We go wherever we want. Wallahi, we will be asked about this ni'am. We will be asked about these blessings. I'm not telling you not to eat or not to live, but I'm telling you, you are a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you want to see the change, you need to foster it within yourselves. And this is an advice primarily to myself, then all of you. I've lost sleep over the past week because of this. Because I'm thinking and saying, how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to help us when we haven't helped ourselves? We haven't even facilitated that change within ourselves, something so simple. You know, we're far away, we can't do much. But you could do a lot. By improving your state as a Muslim, by improving your state as a brother, as a father, as a son, as a sibling, as a neighbor, as a student. You can improve your state by being a proper Muslim. And a Muslim is not just someone who is just good. Good is not good enough. A Muslim is the best. The best, whatever he or she is doing. If you are playing basketball, you are the best. The best in akhlaq, the best in everything. If you are a student, you are the best. the best in conduct, the best academically. If you're at work, you are the best because you're a Muslim. And this is something we have neglected. We just say it's good enough. You know, we're Muslim. I pray 5 times a day. Sometimes it's late, but it's okay. I'm good. It's not good enough. You are the best. خير أمة. Not أمة جيدة. خير, the best of ummah. The best of peoples. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the guidance and make us steadfast upon us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the thabat and allow us to be of the mukhlisin, the sincere. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the guidance and allow us to follow it and make us see the falsehood and abstain from it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utilize us to be the empowering force behind the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He will establish this deen throughout the lands. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.